there, everyone. Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon. And today we have, I'm running out of adjectives for our guests because they've all been so awesome, but this guy's really special. The talent he has is just, I don't know. It's, I always like to say magical, but it's even more than that. So we're honored to have Gary Erbe with us, a fabulous artist. So welcome to the show, Gary. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And Jon, you met Gary at a gallery? Is that how you?
Actually, Gary and I have a mutual friend that I have known since I was a young child, since about 6 years old, and she is very good friends, or had been very good friends with Gary up until many years ago, when, as life does, we all go in separate directions.
Mhm.
But a few months ago, or several months ago, after I bought my house here in New Jersey, I was looking for some artwork, because I do like to put some nice pieces of art in my house. And I wanted something nice. And so our friend Carol said to me, "You've got to see this guy, Gary, and I've got to put you in touch with him." Oddly enough, we grew up in the same city in New Jersey, in Union City. We spent all of our formative years there, and but we didn't know one another because Gary's a few years older than me. But so we found that I spoke to Gary. I called him, and it turned out that he was having an exhibit at the Monmouth Museum here in New Jersey. And I said, sure, I'd love to come and meet you. And that must have been maybe about 2.5 months or so ago, maybe a little less. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I went there and I saw the work of this man. And I was just, I mean, taken beyond belief. The art that he creates cannot be explained by someone like me who has no artistic. I'm sure I could play a guitar, sure I could write a book, but I cannot. First of all, being colorblind doesn't help me at all. But the talent that this man has, that he can use through his hands and a paintbrush and color and.
Well, his
I'll let
vision
him.
to be able to
I'll let
see
him
it.
explain it.
Yeah.
It was fantastic, and in that short period of time since then, we've connected a few times, and I am just honored to know Gary. The best way to explain Gary is like you said, Kellie. It's hard to use the right word, but after you get done looking at Gary's work, after you look at Gary's book, after you look him up online and see where his works of art are or have been, he is what we should consider a national treasure in America.
Yes,
So
I would say that.
there
Gary,
you
is
go.
it okay with you? So you've given us some images of your paintings. Is it
Yes.
okay if we show them in the video so people can see what we're talking about?
Yes, but if you want to put one up, that's the first one, but I'd like to start from the very beginning. That's very important for me to talk about my background. Because
Right,
to understand my work, I think
right.
people have to understand where I come from and why I went in the direction I went. So if I may begin,
Absolutely.
I
Tell us
want
your story.
I want to take everyone back to 1953. Imagine that. It's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
My mother had married for a second time, and so I had a stepfather. And when I entered his apartment, I saw 3 paintings on the wall. I had never seen, I was 9 years old. I had never seen a painting at that point in my life. And I was very intrigued at what I saw. So one day, I grabbed a chair. I was a little boy, and I stood on the chair just to gently touch the oil painting. I wanted to feel what a painting felt like. Well, my stepfather noticed that. A few days later, he comes home with a set of watercolors and brushes and paper, and he encouraged me to sit in the kitchen with him every night. He's reading the newspaper. I'm creating my art in watercolor. And But besides that, he taught me how to cook, how to bake. We had a wonderful, wonderful, he was a fantastic guy. So this went on from 1953 till 1959 when everything crashed. My stepfather suddenly died. He
Hmm.
was only 45 years old. He died right in the apartment. And I had just turned 15 years old, and my life was destroyed at that point. Uh, so at that point, I was on my own, basically. My mother wasn't around too much. She would always go out and all, and just wasn't around. So when I turned 16, I had to quit school, had to get a job. My mother decided to break up the apartment. So I had to get rid of all the furniture in 30 days and move into an $8 a week furnished room. So that's how I started out. And I was working full time and living in an $8 a week room. And that was my life. So for 6 years, from 1959 to January of 1965, I did absolutely no art. But here's the important thing. In 1965, I was working for a general contractor, earning $10 a day, not an hour, a day. That's $50 a week. And I was married. My first two daughters was born in 64, so she was only 6 months old. We were living in a $40 a month cold water flat. And I'm coming home one day from a hard day's work. It was in January of 1965, and I had a revelation. I realized what was missing in my life, because I was miserable, was art, creating art. So at that point, I decided that I wanted to learn how to paint in oil. So that I set upon to do. Now, unfortunately, or maybe it was fortunate, I couldn't afford to go to art school. So I had to teach myself how to paint. I can remember my very first palette was a dinner plate. My easel was the back of a chair. And I used to work on canvas boards in the beginning, which is the cheapest thing you could find. I used to buy Grumbacher paint. They were 10 cents a tube. And this is how I started to learn little by little. Each painting for me was an art lesson. And I noticed I was getting better and better as every paint went by. I was painting landscapes, seascapes, interior scenes, all different types of subject. And like I said, every painting for me was an art lesson. When I would finish a painting, I would look at it and I would dissect it and try to find fault in the painting and say to myself, I'm going to do better on the next painting. And sure enough, I would. So that went on for a couple of years till 67. But then I discovered trompe-l'œil. And when I saw trompe-l'œil, I said to myself, that's what I want to do. Now, for the layman, trompe-l'œil is a French term. What it means is to fool the eye, to create an illusion of depth, an illusion of texture. You create reality that looks so real that you want to grab it and just remove it from the surface. And what's interesting about trompe-l'œil, which I learned later, was that it actually began back in ancient times, and it transcended through the centuries. There have always been practitioners of trompe-l'œil, whether it be mural painting, exterior or interior, three-dimensional sculptural trompe-l'œil, or easel painting. So I really got into trompe-l'œil painting. Meanwhile, once I continued to perfect my technique of paint, it's very important, because once you perfect the technique, it's a lot easier to express an idea, because you have to be able to handle a paint in order to do a successful painting. But there's more than just technique. You have to have an ability to create a wonderful composition. Composition is the backbone of a painting. And then, of course, for me, the ideas are very important. My paintings have a lot of content, and I'm an idea man, and my ideas are very diverse. And that, to me, is the backbone of my work, is my ideas. So anyway, I'm developing my technique and into trompe-l'œil. And also what I was also doing was, I'm never satisfied with something. I always like to try to improve myself. I was experimenting with mediums. This is what you mix with your paint. And I finally came up with a formula that I found fantastic, which I still use to this day. It's a 4-part formula that's fantastic for glazing. I also got into preparing canvases like the old masters, buying the canvases raw and preparing it myself with the glue size and the lead-based primer, and really getting into this. Meanwhile, perfecting my art as every paint went along. And also, I noticed another thing that was a little bit different about me. And remember, I'm self-taught, so everything I learned was on my own. And I found my best approach to creating my trompe-l'œil paintings was to create what's called a construction or a mixed media. So I began creating a construction for each painting, meaning by doing a construction, I was able to develop the idea, develop the composition, develop the colors in a construction form. Once I liked that construction, then I proceeded on to do a painting of that construction. So it went through 2 or 3 different stages before the finished painting. Now, here's what happened, though. In late 1969, by then, by the way, I was working for an engraving company. I began that job in 66, and that was a wonderful job. But to me, it was a job. And when I'm working, I was always thinking about when I come home, I'm going to paint. So I used to work during the day, come home, have a quick dinner, and then paint till 1 in the morning. And then I would run to work the next day and the same thing. Yeah, this went on from 66 to 70. And so anyway, one day I was thinking about where I stood with my work and what I was doing. And I said to myself, do I want to be a follower of the trompe-l'œil artists of the 19th century, or do I want to create something that's me, that's a little more innovative? So I came up with this idea. And the idea was to free the subject matter from its natural surrounding via the illusion of levitation and juxtaposing objects or subject matter that in reality would have no relationship, but when juxtaposed in a painting, created an idea. And I coined the term levitational realism in the late 1969. Here comes 1970. 2 things happened. And number one, I became very prolific. I did 30 paintings in 1 year, which is actually a miracle. There was a lot of considering that technique to do 30 works. I also decided to quit my job as an engraver and try to paint full time. Now, let me tell you why it took guts to do that. I had no money, no bank account, no credit card, nothing, not a penny to my name.
Wow.
I had 2 daughters to support, a wife, so a whole family, and with no money at all. But I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to try to make it as an artist. And my employee in the engraving company says to me, Gary, you shouldn't do that. You should keep a trade because you can't make a living as an artist. I said, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. So the first year in 1970 and into early 71, I was exhibiting, believe it or not, in outdoor shows. And I was winning awards with my levitational paintings, which was fantastic. So here's what happens. 1971 comes along, and I decided to up my game a bit. And I wanted, instead of doing 30 paintings, I said, I'm going to do major works, exhibition paintings, that's going to really catch the eye of critics, art dealers, collectors. So I went about to do 3 major works. As a matter of fact, if we can get onto the screen now, this is very important. The first painting, which is today's special, can we show that painting?
We'll have to, I don't know if
they'll be put in later.
Yeah, we're gonna.
I edit them in later. So which painting do you want me to show now?
The first one, today's special. It's
okay. We'll put that up.
We'll put that up. We'll cut that in.
Oh, okay. All right. Right.
But you can talk about it because she's looking at it right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I want to show today's special, it's a very, very important painting. It's the one I use on my business card. I've been using it for years.
It's an awesome painting.
It's an iconic painting. And now what do I know? Iconic is a big word. What makes something iconic? To me, what makes something iconic is when it's timeless. It's relevant in 1970 when I created it. It's relevant in 2024, and it'll be relevant 1,000 years from now. Because the idea of the painting is, I see people sometimes, they worship money. To them, making money is the most important thing in their lives. I find that revolting, to be honest with you. That's why Carnegie, as an industrialist, you could say all you want negative about him, but I like his philosophy. He said you should spend X amount of years acquiring your wealth and the rest of your life giving it away. And that's why we have all these wonderful Carnegie libraries throughout America, which is wonderful.
Yep.
But that's how I feel also. So that's why, to me, this painting is iconic. What I'm doing is I'm offering the greedy people a hoagie sandwich on a silver platter stuffed with money, saying to them, you love money so much, why don't you eat it?
Eat it. I love it.
It's really an iconic painting.
Yep.
And that's in the true levitational style. And then we go on to other paintings that I've done. In 71, as I mentioned, I wanted to do some major works. Now, one that you're going to be showing is in Out of a Finale. That's a really major painting. I spent many months on this work. But here's the interesting thing, what happened in 1971. I was continuing to exhibit in outdoor shows, and one show in particular, it was in Long Branch, New Jersey, back in 1971. By then, I had purchased a Volkswagen van, and a fellow artist of mine, he joined me in my van with his art. We went down to this exhibition, set up our paintings. It was a 5-day exhibition. I called it Endurance Test for Artists, because can you imagine, every day you're standing outside in the sun, hours and hours with your work set up. Then at the evening time, you got to put the work back in your van, drive all the way back home, come home, rest for the night, next day do the same thing. So I did this for the first 4 days, didn't sell a single painting. Well, my friend gave up. He says to me, Gary, I'm not going to go down the last day. I've had it. And I said to him, well, I'm going down anyhow. So I went down alone. But here's what happened. At the 11th hour, and this is no exaggeration, a man walks up to me and he says to me, I've been looking at a lot of art. I like your work very much. Which is the best painting here? And I pointed to one on the easel. It was one of my major works I did in 1971. So he goes to me, how much you want for the painting? Now, let's put everything in perspective. This is 1971. I said I want $4,000 for it. This is out in the street. Let me put that in perspective. In 1971, I bought my Volkswagen van for $3,400. Wow. Here I sold a painting on the street for $4,000.
Also, Gary, we should also say of this painting, because I have seen this painting. I've stood in front of this painting. This is not a 3 foot by, a 2 foot by 3 foot painting. This has to be at least, would you say, 3 to 4 feet across?
It's 60 by 48. However, that's not the painting. That's the second painting he bought. The first painting he bought was 48 by 38. Here's what happened. When I delivered the painting to him, he says to me, what are you working on? And that's the painting I was working on, that second painting. And out of Finale, he says to me, when it's done, I want to see a picture of it. I showed him a little Polaroid. He goes to me, I'll buy it. How much you want for it? $6,000.
Oh,
he bought it.
Why not?
So here's what happened. Over the past years, he wound up buying 40 of my paintings.
Wow.
Now, this guy was a serious art collector. Not only did he buy my work, he bought an artist's work by the name of Ralph Scarlett. He was a non-objective painter. A lot of people don't know his name, but he was connected with the Guggenheim. It was him, Kandinsky, and Rudolf Bauer that were the first non-objective artists to be in the Guggenheim Museum. This collector of mine owned over 1,000 works by Ralph Scarlett. So he was a serious art collector. He passed away about 18 years ago. So anyway, but here's what happened as a result. I no longer exhibit in the street. I didn't need the outdoor shows anymore. And I began to meet art dealers, other collectors, and winning more awards. And, you know, it kind of like a snowball. It got bigger and bigger as the time went by. So now we're going to fast forward to 1974, when I did a major work, which you have the image of. It's called Northern Landscape. Mm-hmm. And that painting is, once again, one of my really, truly major, I mean, the detail in this painting is incredible. I think I worked about 10 months on this painting. And this was also in the Esses Collect. The gentleman's name was Sam Esses. He bought this painting also. So things are going quite well for me. Meanwhile, always continuing to develop refining my technique and all, getting better and better as time went by. Now, as 1976 came along, I started thinking about the bicentennial. And as an artist, what I can do to contribute to the bicentennial, which was a historic moment in American history. So I came up with an idea of doing 2 monumental works for the bicentennial, which you have the images of. The first one is composition in red, white, and blue. It's 72 by 112. It's one of the largest trompe-l'œil paintings done in American history. I mean, it's huge. It's so big that by then I had a big studio, by the way, in Union City, and I was there for 35 years. It was a big building, had a high ceiling, because you need it for paintings like this. And in order for me to paint that painting, I had to rig up a counterweight system on my easel that would be able to lift the painting up and down on the easel with just a couple of fingers holding it. It was that heavy. And it worked out great. I used weights in the back with a rope and tied it and connected to the back of the stretcher. And it was so easy to handle the painting. So that painting took me 1 year to do. Now, there's more than meets the eye with that painting. There's 37 portraits in that painting of all the presidents up to 1976. And because it was around the time of the Vietnam War, there's also a peace symbol in the painting in the form of folds, wrinkles in the flag. So if you really study the flag, you can actually see the peace symbol and you can see 37 portraits of presidents. That painting took a year to do. Then the second one I did was called Pieces of Time. It's 65 by 100. Once again, it took me another year to do that painting. That painting has more dimension to it. There's more subject that has dimension. It really has a feeling of trompe-l'œil. That painting recently, because the gentleman who owned it was the same man, Esses, and as I mentioned, he passed away. His daughters inherited the whole collection, and little by little, they've been selling the paintings. That particular large painting was just purchased by the Butler Institute of American Art in Ohio for their permanent collection. So now it's in a great museum collection. That's where it belongs. So around that time also, I became very interested in modern art, but I didn't want to abandon trompe-l'œil. So what did I do? I integrated the principle of modern art into trompe-l'œil. And two examples I have here is Take 5, which was painted in 1982. And it's a very large painting. And that painting really got me a lot of attention. I was invited at the National Academy of Design with that painting to exhibit it there. It was in many of my museum exhibitions as part of my exhibition. And it was eventually purchased by a very, very important art collector in the Detroit area. Later on, he wound up selling the painting, but it went to another, even bigger art collector. It's now in a fantastic collection in New York City, in a private collection. And I believe someday that'll be in a major museum because he does a lot of donating to museums. So that's an important, more of a modern version of trompe-l'œil. So what I'm doing with my work is I'm trying to bring trompe-l'œil into the 21st century. I think that's my goal here, not to have it look like it was done 100 years ago, but that it should look very, very contemporary. And the second paint I have here, which is very, very interesting and important, is Virtuoso. Now, I can tell you, this is a violin painting. It really looks like a collage. It looks like paper and all, and different textures. Now, what's interesting about that painting is when I exhibited that painting for the first time in a gallery in New Jersey, it was sold right away. And the person who bought that painting sort of disappeared. In other words, the painting became lost for a number of years. And I thought, I kind of regretted selling that painting. It was an important work. So I tracked the guy down and I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And I bought that painting back. And I'm so glad I did, because here's what happened. A few years later, I was invited into an important show at the Brandywine Museum in Chatsford, Pennsylvania. Now, anybody familiar with Andrew Wyeth knows the Brandywine Museum. It's a very important museum, and it was a special national trompe-l'œil exhibition. So I put that painting in that exhibition amongst a couple of others. Well, during the show, the curator calls me up and she says, Gary, we'd like to buy that painting for the collection. Now, why that's important? They don't buy contemporary art. However, they do have a collection of 19th century trompe-l'œil. They felt that that painting would represent contemporary trompe-l'œil art. Well, I was with a dealer at the time in New York City. So they said to me, Gary, should we contact your dealer to buy that painting? I immediately said no. I said, I'm the owner of that painting. You can deal with me. And I'm going to tell you why I didn't do that. The dealer wanted a lot of money for that painting. And I felt it was so much money, the museum wouldn't buy it. I'm more flexible. To me, it's more important to get it into a museum. The money doesn't matter. They bought it, mind you, and they paid thousands of dollars for it, but they didn't pay a huge amount the gallery wanted. But here's what happened. When I told the gallery I sold the painting, and because they didn't make their commission, they got mad at me. And I said to them, well, listen, I didn't make any money on that painting because I bought it at a high price. I sold it for what I paid for it. You know what they said to me? Well, we never lose money on paintings. And you know what? I left the gallery anyhow. Yeah. So who cares about the gallery? The main thing is a painting found a great home. And
That's
to me,
right.
that's more important than $1 million. The money doesn't mean anything. And
You
so,
know, well, wait, before you go on, I want to stop on this painting for a second.
sure,
If everybody would just take a look at this image, it
please
looks
do.
like it's a photograph of art that is laying on top of a cardboard box. Now,
Corrugate, yes,
Gary painted that cardboard box. I mean, it's an easel. He painted it on easel, but to make it look like a
corrugated.
cardboard box.
So
And if
corrugated.
you, yeah, corrugated. There you go. That's not a word I use often. So
Wait,
he
which
made,
one are we talking about? Virtuoso?
Virtuoso, yes.
yes, look
Yes.
at that. It looks like
Okay.
it's on cardboard, but it's not, or corrugated box. But he painted those lines of the
Yeah.
box. Each of those lines. Plus, look at the way the paper is wrinkled at the bottom. That's painted
Yeah.
to look like that.
Well, no,
That's what
all of
Trump
his
did.
art is like that. I mean, it's incredible.
It
Well,
is.
well, you know why? To me, that's an important painting because flashback to when I started painting trompe-l'œil, I had created 3 violin paintings in the true tradition of trompe-l'œil, very realistic. And I would have never imagined back in 1967 or 68 that I would do a violin painting like this. It's such a move forward for me to do something very modern with the subject matter of a violin. So it was like a real breakthrough from tradition to modern. And that is why people pay attention to my work, because my work is not only very diverse, but I try to be very creative and very imaginative. And when someone comes to one of my shows, they don't get bored stiff by seeing the same subject over. Every painting is a different experience.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that's
Yes.
what makes my shows, I think, interesting.
And I
Very.
also want to let our audience know, you hear Gary explaining something. I just want to be very specific about this. Trompe-l'œil is spelled TROMPE dash L apostrophe OEIL. Obviously,
Correct.
Okay.
very French word.
Yes.
It's an artistic term for the highly realistic optical illusion of 3-dimensional space and objects on a 2-dimensional surface, which, to be honest with you, Gary, here in the 21st century, I think we should start calling this stuff Erbe.
Yeah. The Erbe style. Yeah.
One thing I will say that when I began painting trompe-l'œil, there was only 1 or 2 artists I knew of that were painting trompe-l'œil, and I think there is a greater interest now in trompe-l'œil painting today than there was 50 years ago, which I like. I'm very happy that there are other artists now doing trompe-l'œil painting. So I don't know if I have anything to do with it, but I'm sure a lot of people have seen my work over the years and may have been influenced by it, and I hope they are.
Yes.
That's important to me. But I always
Right.
tell artists, this is very important, they should spend 99% of their time creating art and 1% promoting it. Because when the opportunity comes by, you've got to be ready for it.
Right.
And you've got to be consistent in the work that you do. Every painting, I mean, I don't do a lot of work. I'm only doing like 3 paintings a year, but they're consistent in quality. I would never do a pot boiler. I don't think I've ever done a pot boiler. I put a lot of thought in each painting, and I stress that to my fellow artists that take their art seriously. You got to be willing to make sacrifices if you want to be an artist. I mean, you may not go on vacation because you're going to spend that money on a good frame, but it's all part of developing your own style and your own identity.
Yeah. It's breathtaking, and it's so thought-provoking, and I want to look at them alone later more, carefully, and see all the stories in them. Yeah, they're
Well,
breathtaking.
I can tell you an interesting story if you'd like to hear it. In regards to that painting that the Butler Institute purchased, back in 1980, I think it was 80, I believe it was 83, I was exhibiting in a one-man show at the New Jersey State Museum in Trenton at the time. And somebody sent me a prospectus in the mail for what's called a mid-year show at the Butler Institute. It's an open competitive exhibition. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to enter that show. So I sent a slide of that major painting to the Butler Institute, and they accepted it for the show. So I had never been to Youngstown, Ohio. So I had to rent a big truck because it's a huge painting. And I drove out there by myself in this truck all the way out to Ohio and delivered the painting. So towards the end of the show, I received a phone call from an art dealer from Bethesda, Maryland. And he saw my painting at the museum. He goes, Gary, are you going to come pick up the painting? I said, yes, I am. Well, I'd like to meet you and talk to you. And also, would you like to meet the director of the museum? Of course, who wouldn't want to meet a director of an art museum? So I said, sure. So I go out there. I met this art dealer, and he was interested in handling my work. It didn't work out, but he was very nice. But then he also introduced me to the director, and we had dinner together. At the dinner table, the director says to me, Gary, I like your work very much. Would you like to have a show here? Now, that's very rare. That based on seeing one painting, they would give you a one-man show. Right. And that, my first show at that museum was in 1985. And since then, 3 of my retrospectives were organized by the Butler, the 25th, the 40th, and the 50th retrospective. Each retrospective traveled to 4 museums. There were 12 museums they went to over the years. And in between other shows, but I also curate shows. So I curated many shows for the Butler Institute, plus other institutions. So I sort of give back also in many ways. For instance, I served as president of Allied Artists of America in New York City for 11 years, but I've been on their board for over 50 years. Oh, wow. And so I really do a lot for my fellow artists. I've launched the careers of artists. I help them to get shows. I get them into galleries. I always feel like, because I had it so hard in the beginning, that I understand what it's like to be, especially to start out. It's a very difficult profession. I always say, what's unfair about being a professional artist is this: you're not guaranteed anything. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Unlike if you become a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, you're pretty well guaranteed a decent living. With art, you could spend your whole life painting and not make a dime. You paint art because you want to paint art. You love what you're doing. And that's the most important thing for me. I happen to be able to make a living at it. But I will say one thing: I never compromise myself, never commercialize myself in any way. I've been true to my profession, and I will not do anything that I feel doesn't interest me. And believe me, I've turned down commissions because I felt they were just too trite. They just didn't interest me. And I would say, no, I'm not interested in doing it. Other times, if I did take a commission, I would tell the client, listen, I have to have full control over this composition. I'm going to pick the subject. I'm going to do the composition. I decide how it's done. And they would agree with that. And I never failed to satisfy a client. But I don't do too many commissions, to be honest. I don't really like them. I just like creating my own ideas. And anyway, so this Butler Institute, a number of years ago, and you have in one of the images, they asked me if I would do a major work for their sports gallery. So you have a painting there entitled Baseball. And it took me almost a year to do this composition, and it hangs in their permanent gallery. It's a beautiful sports gallery. It's a centerpiece that they wanted for the gallery. And if you look at it, I also designed a frame for that particular painting, and I designed many frames. Now, I know artists not into frames like they used to be, but I always believe that a painting deserves the right finishing frame around it to really give it that finishing touch. And a lot of times I designed for my paintings, had them custom made, and it was always a good marriage. And I think
so. That's a real frame. It's not part of the painting.
No, that's an actual frame. Okay. But I custom made in New York City at Loewy, which is one of the premier framers in New York, and designed especially for that painting. And the Butler was very, very happy with the painting, and that was a commission, as I mentioned to you. Yeah. But now I also have done sculpture. I think I mentioned earlier, trompe-l'œils. They've also done 3-dimensional work. So I've done 3-dimensional too. And a fine example is the one I've given you. It's called Comics. Now that is an oil on bronze, but it's not cast. What happened was I was with an art dealer in New York City for a number of years. It was called the Alexander Gallery on Madison Avenue. And I had my first big show in New York in that gallery in 1982 and another show in 85. So around 85, he says to me, Gary, because he was a collector of comic books and toys, antique toys. He was, Gary, do you think you could do a sculpture on comics? Well, of course, I never did a sculpture on comics, but I love challenges. So I said, sure, I could do a sculpture on comics. When I got back to my studio, I had to decide, how am I going to do a sculpture of comics? So I came up with this idea of creating each comic individually out of sheet bronze and then hand painting them and then putting together as a stack of comics and then creating them that they could be permanent. And then, of course, I had to design and build a base. I had the base specially made and gilded for the comics. And when I brought it in, and by the way, it's very deceiving. It looks like comics, but guess what? If you try to pick it up, it weighs a ton because it's solid bronze. But anyway, I bring it into the gallery. Well, he was floored. He absolutely loved the piece so much he commissioned me to do a second one. Now, what I learned later on, which I found fascinating, was that you won't believe who bought one of my comic sculptures, Michael Jackson. I never knew it until after Michael Jackson died. Alex says to me, Gary, do you know who owns one of your comics? Who owned it? Michael Jackson. I said, gee, why didn't you tell me years ago? But he had purchased one of my sculptures.
Wow.
But my sculptures are very rare. I've only done, like, in all the years, 54 years, I've only done 11 sculptures. But I found them fascinating to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's breathtaking. It's just, I don't even know how you have to have a vision, right? It's got to be to do, I know your hands have to be able to do the painting, but you have to be able to see the depth and the feel and the texture.
That's a good question.
You know what an artist once told me? He was a member of the National Academy, much older than I. He said to me, Gary, you have an eyes like a hawk, because he came to my studio. As a matter of fact, I was working on Virtuoso at the time. And when he saw that composition, he goes, Gary, your eyes are like a hawk, because of the detail I was putting into this painting. But, sort of comes natural to me. I think even my eye doctor said my eyes somehow are very good for detail. And how true that is.
There you go. Well, Gary, I don't know if you've answered this yet, or you've mentioned it. Where do you get your ideas from?
My ideas come from within and also from things I hear, things I see. Now, what I do is, this is interesting. I have a book of ideas. I never take an idea and start it right away because I like to kind of mull over it a little bit, study it. And I even do like a little thumbnail sketch of the original idea. And I look at it a few times and maybe years will go by till I finally look at it and say, you know what? It's time to do this idea. And then when I'm ready to do the idea, I begin, as I stated before, creating a construction. And that's when the idea really starts to develop. And it probably, most of the times, it completely changes than the original concept. But that's what art's all about. It's not, there are not any rules or regulations in art, although there are two in trompe-l'œil that I must address because I've learned to circumvent those rules. Number one is, in trompe-l'œil, the subject has to be its original natural size. An example, I did a big painting of a carousel horse. If I did a little 8x10 canvas of a carousel horse, it wouldn't be too convincing. But this is a life-size painting of a carousel horse. And it's really quite a painting. It's called Fantasy and Pursuit. It's on my website if anybody wants to see it. But it's a wonderful painting. It's in a collection in Florida. And the other rule is you cannot paint the human figure because we're animate. We breathe. We move, right? How can I fool the eye if I have a person in a painting? They're going to look like they're frozen. How I get around it, I like paintings like Take 5, where it's an abstracted figure in the painting. It looks like a human figure. It's abstracted, but it gives you the feeling that there's a human presence without doing the human figure. That's how I get around it. And I was able to achieve and doing some of these larger works like that because of the way I approach it, in more of a creative, a manner rather than sticking to the rules. So, I always tell artists, you got to really be inventive. You can't stagnate. You can't say, oh, I like what I'm doing. I'm selling this subject. Let me continue to do it. Forget it. You've got to move on. You got to grow as an artist. Your work should change. I believe it should change. And I think that's an important part of the growth of an artist. And that's why retrospectives are important because in a retrospective, you can exhibit the growth of your work from the very beginning to the present. And I think it makes for a fascinating exhibition. So I
Yeah.
hope it answers that for you.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's breathtaking to look at your art, just to see it all. And I'm looking off to the side right now, looking at it, but we are going to have it on the video so everybody can see it, and we'll put your website up too. Do you have a favorite painting? I mean, is there one that's a favorite that you let go and you're like, do you keep track of them? Do you know who
Well,
has them all?
let me tell you something. There is a painting that I did. It's called The Night Before Christmas. It's the most detailed painting I've ever done in my life. It's huge. It took me 16 months to do. Even the frame, I designed a very special frame for this painting. The frame at the time cost $14,000 just
Oh,
for the
geez.
frame. But it's a magnificent, it looks like a rectangular wreath, Christmas wreath, with hollies and candy canes, all carved in wood in relief and gilded. It's absolutely magnificent. It was carved by the master carver in New York at Loewy Framing, which is the Rolls Royce of framings in New York City. I've been doing business with them for many years. They're fantastic. And they were the only ones I felt that could pull off this particular design of a frame. But anyway, this painting, they could see it on my website. It's really, really a special painting. And there's over 60 objects in this painting, and it's all relating to Christmas.
Wow. Oh, I would love that. Yeah.
Oh, there's Santa's bag with the toys. It's just, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So
Yeah.
you really have to see the painting. But I can assure you, it's quite a painting. Another one I did it's called The 50s. Another huge painting. And the main subject in this painting is a jukebox. But for me, what I created was the jukebox for me became a time machine. And out of the two sides of the jukebox is coming capsules. And in the capsules on one side, you see things related to movies, of sci-fi movies from the 50s, like the Creature from the Black Lagoon is in this painting. The other side shows the ice cream parlors we used to have in the 50s. We'd go to the ice cream parlors and all. And then coming out of the jukebox is things like Howdy Doody, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, all things iconic relating to the 1950s. And the painting is huge. And I got to tell you a story about how this all came about, me doing this painting. In the early 70s, I had a show at a gallery in New Jersey, and a gentleman saw my work but couldn't afford my paintings. Many years later, he never forgot my work and called me up. And he tells me, I saw your painting years ago. Now I can afford them. I want to buy one of your paintings. So he comes to my studio, and I said, I'm ready to start this painting on the 50s. Would you be interested? He goes, I love the idea. I want to buy that painting. So it was sold before I even started the painting.
Wow.
And for a lot of money too. I must say, it was incredible. But it was a 1-year project. So then after that painting, I started my Christmas painting. He comes in and sees it. I want to buy that painting. So that's the only 2 paintings he ever bought from me, but they're 2 like major, major works. And he lives in Delray Beach, Florida. That's where those paintings are now.
Wow.
And they're really 2 outstanding works. But, to sort of say, is there a favorite? Honestly, that's a tough one, because every painting for me, there's a reason why they exist. I don't do a painting, but just the hell of doing a painting.
Right.
Now, if I don't have a reason to do a painting, for some reason, I can't create the painting. I don't know why. That's the way it is. And so each painting to me is a very important part of my life. I've only done maybe about 350 works in 54 years.
Wow.
Now, that may seem like a little bit of painting, because there are artists that do thousands of works. But for each painting, it's like doing 10 paintings. There's a lot of work that goes into each painting. But I will say this, it's an impressive body of work, because each painting is very consistent in quality. And I would never sign a painting unless I felt it was to my standards. And that's the way I've always been. I always will be that till the day I die. I always say I'm still painting every day. I'm going to be 80 years old, still painting every day, and I'm going to die at the easel, and that's fine with me. But I'm going to leave behind, hopefully, a body of work
Oh,
and
yeah.
future generations will be inspired by, And I hope that my paintings survive. That's very important to me because I put a lot of my life into this artwork.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know how many millions and millions and gazillions of dollars your painting is going to be worth when you die?
Well,
Isn't that the sad part after you die? They're like, woo.
isn't that what happens to a lot of these artists? It's sad. You look at Van Gogh as a good example. One painting he sold, and now they're worth millions of dollars. It's very sad that this happens to artists, but it's not the first time. It's happened to many, many artists over the years.
Right. You know, I get asked that all the time. Which was your favorite book? And each one I liked for a different reason. And that's true. But you know, I had there was an actor when I lived in LA. His name was Richard Bacallion, better known as Dickie Bacallion. He was one of those actors from the 50s and 60s. He worked all the time. He was basically one of those guys. He had the face that you can't forget, but his name you can't remember. But he was one of those actors, and he played the bad guy most of the time in all of the TV shows. He was the detective who shoots Faye Dunaway at the end of Chinatown.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he was in fantastic movies, was in a few Sinatra movies. He was good friends with Sinatra. And I asked him once, what was your favorite movie? And he says, John, as an actor, my favorite movie is my next one.
Oh.
You know,
Always looking forward.
Well,
Always looking forward.
you're always looking forward to doing the next one.
That to me is very important. That's an interesting statement because I believe in that. That's what creativity is. I always like when I finish a painting, I completely block the idea out of my mind and I put a fresh idea into my brain. And then I move forward with the next painting. And the next one has to be completely different than my previous painting. But I can tell you, and I like to tell you something, share something with all of you. I don't know if you believe in miracles, but I believe in miracles because something happened to me many years ago that tells me that I was destined to be what I am today. When I was only about 12 months old, my mother was having serious mental issues and she was getting shock treatments. That's how bad it was for her. And one winter day, I don't know why she did it, but she puts me in a high chair in the kitchen and didn't strap me in. I fell out of the high chair. I hit my head on a radiator and I was laying against the radiator in the winter. The radiator was red hot. You know how hot a cast iron radiator gets? Yeah. I was literally burning to death. Oh. My mother was in a trance. She didn't even know it was happening to me. The miracle is, and you know at that age, at 12 months old, your skull is not completely hard. The bones are not hard. It was actually burning through the side of my face. My hand and my arm, too, was touching the radiator. The miracle is a friend of my father's happened to stop by. Now, back then, we didn't lock doors back then. He came in, saw me laying against the radiator, and according to what they told me, my head was swollen and it was purple. They rushed me to the hospital. And of course, obviously, I survived. But I lived many years with this terrible scar on my face and on my hand and my arm. And when I was 17, I saved enough money up to have plastic surgery on my face. And so the scar is half the size of what it used to be. But when I was a kid, it was beet red for years. Now, the surgeon told me as I get older, it's going to become more of a skin color. And he was right. It's not beet red anymore. That's one of the miracles. The second miracle is when I was with my girlfriend, before we married, we decided to elope. So I had a 58 Pontiac. And we said, let's go to Canada and get Matt Canada. I was 18 and she was 17. So we drive to Canada to get near Niagara Falls. They wouldn't marry us. So we drive all the way back. And I said to her, you know what? Let's try again. We might have better luck the second time. We didn't have sleep. We weren't sleeping. This is like 20-something hours later. And here I am around 1 a.m, heading towards Niagara Falls. And I look at her and she's sleeping. And I fell asleep. And what happened, another miracle, my tire blew out the second I fell asleep. And I grabbed the wheel And I must have been going 60, 70 miles an hour. I grabbed the wheel and took control of the car. And why I say it's a miracle, in all the years I'm driving, I never had a blowout in a tire. That was the only time when I fell asleep
Same.
behind the wheel. It's like as if,
Wow.
I was destined to do something with my life. And I believe it was my art because, like I said earlier, I never took an art lesson. Yet within 5 years of picking up a brush, I became self-employed. That in itself is a miracle because I knew nothing about painting. But yet in 5 years, I'm painting full time. So, I mean, I took it seriously, which I still do today. But I still think I was destined to be what I am.
Yep.
I think so too. Absolutely. Just hearing your story, even if you hadn't had those other miracles, and even if your story wasn't, didn't have challenges, it was a gift. I mean, it's just a gift to be able to see what you can see and then put it on canvas and create something that magical.
Well,
Yeah.
let me add to that. You see, a lot of artists think that if you go to art school, you become an artist. Well, that's not true. You learn the fundamentals of art. You learn how to mix colors, how to create, compositional, yes. But it's the combination of the brain and the ability that makes an artist. It's not just an ability to create art.
Yeah. Some things can't be taught. I mean,
I believe
some
that.
things
I
can't be
believe
taught. You're born with it. You have it. It's God-given, or whatever gift you want to call it. It's a gift, I think. I mean, what you've done is
I like to share my gift. I share it through exhibits. I love talking to people. I love helping other artists. I've helped so many artists over the years. Matter of fact, there was a company in Kansas City, Missouri, Smith Kramer Fine Arts. And what they would do is they would organize traveling exhibitions. So somehow I got connected with them and I wound up curating 3 shows for them. One of them was the Salmagunde Club in New York City. It's one of the oldest art clubs in New York on Fifth Avenue, a beautiful brownstone building. I put together their art collection, which I did all by myself. I did research on every single artist. I put together some of they have a beautiful palette collection, artist palettes, original palettes. I put together palettes, archival photographs, all things related to the history of Salmagunde Club. And through Smith Kramer, it traveled to 15 museums, which is incredible. I mean, it was an amazing exhibition, and I'm the one that curated that show. I curated also a trompe-l'œil exhibition. So I located trompe-l'œil artists from all over America, invited them into the show. That went to 8 museums. Then I curated an Allied Artists of America exhibition. This is the organization I was president of. That went to another 7 museums. So you see, in my own way, I've been helping other artists because they have opportunities to exhibit in museums. They may never have that opportunity. I've given them those opportunities. As a matter of fact, this one artist I mentioned that came to my studio, Werner Groschens, who passed away in the 1980s. He's the one that said, I have eyes like a hawk. He was a hell of a nice guy. He introduced me to the director of the New Britain Museum in Connecticut back in 1974. As a result, I not only got a show there, but that iconic painting I mentioned, today's special, was the first painting that entered a collection. They were purchased the painting, and it's the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain, Connecticut. But here's what happened. As he got older, he sort of was forgotten. And I felt so bad for him. So I decided I want to do something for him because he would help me in the beginning. So I wound up getting 3 museums to take an exhibition of his work. And I curated the exhibition. He lived all the way up in New York State. I would travel up there every weekend because he was so old at the time. I would pack the paintings for him, varnish paintings, get everything ready for the show. I helped him with the catalog. Sadly, he died before the opening reception.
Oh.
However, he died such a happy man because here he was having these wonderful exhibitions.
Yeah.
So see, this is the kind of guy I am. I want to reach out to help other artists. That's the way I am. I can't help it. And I always give them my card to artists. Anytime you want to talk to me, give me a call. I'm accessible.
He's very
You're very
accessible.
special. You're a special man, Gary, in many ways.
Well, I feel very blessed, and I think that if I could do anything to help my fellow artists, I'm more than happy to do so.
Well,
I must tell you about my future plans.
Yes.
please.
once again, I'm always thinking ahead. I
Yeah.
don't know if you thought about this, but in 2026, that'll mark the 250th anniversary of the founding of this nation. So over the past 55 years that I've been painting professionally, I've done only 15 American flag paintings, of which 2 you see on, you're going to show my major work, but I've done 15. Each painting stands alone as a totally different concept. So I came up with an idea to do a very special exhibition focusing on those 15 paintings, but adding another 40 works to the show. It's going to be a big, like 50 to 60 paintings in a traveling museum exhibition. It's going to open in New Jersey at the Morris Museum next year. I'm still working on a date, so it's probably going to be in the fall of next year. And then it's going to travel to another 3 or 4 museums through 2026. So that's kind of my plans for the near future.
That's great.
Wow.
Now what, let me just see
Well,
here.
we're going to put up your website so people can see what you have on your website, but we're like, if somebody wants to see your paintings live, which are probably even more breathtaking, where can people find your paintings?
Well, I was with a gallery in New York City. I've been with a number of galleries in New York. I was with ACA Gallery for a few years, Alexander Gallery for many years, and I was with the Gerald Peters Gallery recently. But what happened, because of my shows now, I had to pull all my paintings out.
Oh,
So they don't have a single painting in the gallery right now.
okay.
They're all with me. And right now they're going to stay with me because I have other shows coming up. So the only way they could see my work right now, either come to my studio or at the next museum exhibition.
Can they see the schedule of your shows on your website?
In the future, once we
Okay.
nail down all the venues, then we'll be able to post the venues also. Yes,
Okay.
of course we will.
So
Okay.
Gary, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, first of all, I want to be remembered as creating honest art. Did no trickery, no nothing. It was all came from the heart. I also hopefully want my paintings to survive because it's such an important part of my life. And I want to also be remembered that I extended myself helping other artists. That to me is very, very important. If I can be remembered by those 3 things, I'd be happy. So that's about it. Yeah.
I think you will
got those
be.
covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got that covered all already.
Yeah, and your paintings are such treasures. I mean, they're going to be around for a very, very long time.
I
You
hope
will
so. I
always
hope
be
so.
remembered. Yeah.
It's sad to say this, but I've seen many artists when they die, their work falls between the cracks. Although I've already made arrangements that people know what they're going to do with my work when I die. And hopefully it's years from now. But I've already made arrangements that's what's going to happen to my artwork. And I'm a perfectionist in every way in life. Even leaving this world, I'm a perfectionist. So,
Well, Gary, I got to tell you, in the few times that I've met you and I've been in your company already, I truly consider you a national treasure to my country. And I consider you a wonderful person and a dear friend already.
thank you. The feeling is mutual.
And I am extremely grateful for having you, even though it's only been for the last couple of months. I am extremely grateful for having you in my life.
Well, it's the beginning of a long friendship.
Thank you. I agree with
you. Of course. And you're a creative person. You've written wonderful books. So we sort of have that connect, the creative minds.
Absolutely. And the fact that we both came from Union City.
Union City, New Jersey. That's right. I had my studio for 35 years in Union City.
That's right.
Yes.
There you go.
All my paintings were done there.
So Kelly, you have a job ahead of you putting in his
yeah, I'll put him in. I'm in tears right now because you guys, it really is a special experience talking with you and seeing your artwork and thinking about your legacy. So thank you so much for your time. And yes, I will put your paintings, the images of your paintings up and share with our audience your magic too. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Gary. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Okay, Gary. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
All views expressed in this video belong to Kellie Nicholson, John D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Unless otherwise noted, all photos are public domain. Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kellie and John.